Welcome to the Council on Recovery's conversations on addiction, recovery, and family, from our living room to yours. In a period that continues to be filled with uncertainty, the Council invites you into weekly conversations about how we can respond. You may have experienced something that you have struggled to cope with. You may be using a substance or feel like your recovery is at risk because you are struggling to manage right now. Or you may know someone who is struggling. You are not alone. The Council is here to support you. Leading our conversation this week is Lori Fiester, Clinical Director for the Center for Recovering Families. Please note that we hope to be able to field questions using the chat feature and welcome your questions, thoughts, comments, and feedback. We would also love at different moments for you to turn on your cameras, unmute your mics, and engage in the conversation. This is being recorded and will be uploaded to the Council on Recovery website. Now, if you will, please join Lori in her living room.
Well, it's not my living room, but this is my office, so welcome, and thank you all for being here. I can't do my living room because I have big dogs that will be in there and they'll bark. So we're going to my office and we'll have a nice conversation here. Today's subject is trauma and the connection to addiction. And so this is big stuff. And I hope that those that are listening and now and later, if there's any questions, please feel free to ask. We do have that chat feature. You can always interrupt me. Know that I might not remember where I was, but you can interrupt me and we'll do what we can to get back to your answer or your question. So I'm going to start this piece with what trauma is. And I think it's really important to understand what trauma is because many don't. I've been working with clients for over 30 years now, and in our assessments, we ask them all the time, so in your lifetime, what has been traumatic for you? And I will say most that have answered, especially that have addiction, oh, not really anything, or maybe it was the hurricane, or maybe it was something that most of us would know about, but they don't know. And it's really interesting as we get then into their story, these pieces come out and we see that they really have been impacted by trauma. And it's just mostly because we don't know how to define it. So one of the things I really want to make sure that everyone hears about is that trauma originates as a response from the nervous system. It's not about the event per se. So I want to say that again. Trauma originates as a response in the nervous system and doesn't originate in an event. While the event can be traumatic, it's about what our body does with it. So the official definition is trauma is a response to a deeply distressing or disturbing event that overwhelms an individual's ability to cope, causes feelings of helplessness, diminishes their sense of self and their ability to feel the full range of emotions and experiences. That's a lot of words. When you think about what trauma is, it really is an overwhelm of our system. And oftentimes, what's happening around us we've not seen before. So pulling on our coping doesn't always work because we haven't seen it before. I did bring up hurricanes earlier. Houston has had them, and we certainly have had our share of bad ones. So we might have had some understanding of what that may look like. And I'm going to guess that most of you, if you've been in Houston since Hurricane Harvey, you may have some trauma around that, whether you were impacted or you were on the sidelines, because we all watched it. If you weren't in it, you were watching it, or you might have been in some of that helping mode to help others. While you may not have some effects on the physical or the emotional effects from it, I'm going to guess you saw it as a traumatic event. By the next time you heard rain, you might have cringed, or you're watching now when those big rainstorms come, or you have a little hypervigilance when the weather is on. This is about trauma. I know I said a whole lot of stuff, so I'm hoping that if anybody's, if that doesn't make sense, that you write something down and let us know, because that's a lot of information. We also, in the field of trauma work, we will also use the word of shock trauma. And this is when it arises from an event that is just too much for our system, and we as the body can't integrate it or manage it. It kind of breaches our own barriers of the stimulus coming in and overwhelms our capacity to respond. It triggers intense fear or maybe even terror. And terror is different than fear. It causes that helplessness and that out of control feeling. We see trauma, this happen also in development. When it arises from an overwhelming experience of neglect, physical and emotional and sexual abuse in childhood. And it's often intertwined with experiences of shock trauma. And this is where we see most of our clients, and in fact, is that they have had some sort of trauma in the history of their family of origin. And this is when we're talking, this is when our folks really have a hard time identifying, because this was what was normal for them. So I'm gonna take a breath here for a sec, because this is kind of big stuff. When I think about trauma, we, as human beings, even today, we are seeing and experiencing trauma events. I can't imagine anyone not having some sort of feeling around what's happening in our world today, either from our COVID disease that's going on that has killed so many people, and the danger that's even happening in our own Houston with the numbers increasing daily, to what's happening outside with racism and riots and just what is happening across our board. I can't imagine no one's been impacted in some way. So with this impact, some of the common responses and symptoms of trauma on the emotional side can be sadness, could be anger, denial, fear, and shame. All of these are feelings. There are primary feelings. And I'm going to also say that a lot of our clients even have a hard time identifying those feelings. With those feelings, they can become so intense it can lead to insomnia issues, not being able to sleep a whole night through, nightmares, difficulty in relationships with a significant other or at work or with our friends. And usually when that comes about is that we have a lot of irritation. We have a small bandwidth of ability to deal with someone. We might have emotional outbursts. Some of the physical problems are nausea, dizziness, again, altered sleep patterns, changing in appetites. We might not eat as much, or we might eat too much. Headaches, gastrointestinal issues. These are just the common stuff. And I kind of went on before when I was talking about today. In our world today, any of those symptoms, I want to say, are really a common issue for an uncommon time in our lives. While they're serious, we are really experiencing something we haven't experienced before, unless you're old enough to have lived in, the early 1900s. In my lifetime, I've not experienced this. So it would make sense that we have some of these issues. Now, and I'm saying that because I want to normalize it as well. If these issues continue, though, that's when we have to seek help. And then that makes me want to jump into, oftentimes, when these issues become overwhelming, that's when we might start using the substance. So when I think about oftentimes, and I'll speak specifically to the developmental trauma. If we've had issues of abuse, neglect, either physically, emotionally, sexually, religious, all these things that come in, this types of trauma can impact us as adults. And I really want to ensure to say that I am not here to bash parental people, those parental units. They did the best they could with what they've had. They're most likely doing the same that was done to them, because we really don't know what we don't know. How can I be a better parent if I don't know how? So when we think about substances and beginning to use, it's usually at a place in time when our natural defense mechanisms fail. So if I have a defense, I'll use anger because that's a good one for me. As a kid, I knew that well because that was displayed in my family. And so my natural defense would be that, to lash out, yell, scream, whatever that is. But let's say that event that was traumatic for me happened at 16, 15 or 16, and I did the anger thing for a while. Well, after a while, it's not going to work anymore. So then I might begin to drink or drug. In my case, it was I just stopped eating and became anorexic and bulimic. So in that way, it was a way of controlling and numbing those feelings. Because when you're starving, you're really not feeling that sadness or that anger. You're just pretty hungry. Or you're looking at, you're focused or compulsed on other things to distract you from those core feelings. Had a lot of shame on board too. So that was a good distractor, because the thinner I got, the less shame allegedly I had. Not quite. So if you think about then this correlation, this is where we start using our drug of choice. And then over time, we get into the different categories of substance use. So, and addiction. So I want to go into that pretty quickly. Well, not quickly. I want to go into that next. I'm wondering if there's any questions or thoughts at this moment in time. I'm gonna pause for a minute, and if there's anything that comes up, please type away or unmute yourself. Okay. So again, if that comes up again, please feel free to stop. I know this is a tough subject, and it's not always easy to ask questions, so and or share thoughts. So when we think about the definition of addiction, and I will go through its progression, but I'm going to use the science terms now. Addiction is a primary chronic disease of brain reward, motivation, memory, and related circuitry. What? Dysfunction in these circuits leads to a characteristic biological, psychological, social, spiritual manifestations. Addiction often involves cycles of relapse and remission. And that piece is what makes it a disease. And this is a brain disease, by the way. This is, our brain has been rewired once we get to that stage of dependency. I think an easier definition for me is a compulsive, chronic, physiological or psychological need for habit-forming substance behavior or activity having harmful physical, psychological, or social effects, and typically causing well-defined symptoms such as anxiety, irritability, tremors, or nausea upon withdrawal or abstinence. It's the state of being addicted. That's a bunch of information. And while it makes sense to me, it's possibly because I've been in the field this long, I finally can kind of get the grasp of this being a brain disease. And I have to say that brain disease information really didn't come clearly into early 2000. So we've been talking about this disease for a long time, but we really couldn't prove where it was impacting the brain. I'm not about to go into that, as I am a social worker, and science befuddles me, but I can understand this piece. So as I talk about, especially when I talk to clients and their families, I start off with, I think this is an easier way. We look at this as being 4 categories of progression. And we start off as use. And use is that spot where I have a drink. And I'm going to use alcohol because alcohol is legal. And it's one of the ones that we see predominantly in our treatment program. So use is I have a drink. And that's just about all it is, and that might happen here and there. But it's not anything I'm paying attention to. And I often try to explain it. It's kind of like me eating Brussels sprouts. I really don't think about Brussels sprouts ever. But if they're served to me, I may impart them. I may say, oh, okay, that's a nice little Brussels sprout. But I really don't think about it after it's done, okay? So that's use. And there is a part of America that actually does just use. It's not everyone overdrinks. The next category is misuse. And misuse, I'm going to guess most have done that as well. Misuse is, let's say I'm at my local taqueria and I'm enjoying my tacos because I love a good taco. And I may have a beer. And you know, that beer is really good and nice and cold, and wow, I'm having fun with my friends and I'm talking, and it's just a lot of fun. And we're still having fun, so maybe another round is ordered and I drink that. And then another round is ordered and I drink that. And by the time I'm done, maybe I've had 4 beers and I notice I'm intoxicated and I make the decision to drive, or maybe even if I don't make that decision, I get home and the next day I feel not well. I might yell at the dog. I might be grumpy at work. And I noticed that and I said, oh, that was too much. Oh, I can't do that again. But I'm at the same taqueria the following week and I'm sampling those wonderful tacos, crunchy by the way. And I do the same thing. And I do it again, and I have the same consequences, but maybe it's a little more intense. Maybe I now have a raging headache and I'm really irritable. And I do it again. By this time, you know, we have said, I have to stop. And most of us can go, okay, I've had a consequence. I can't do that anymore. 4 beers is enough. Well, actually, that 1 beer was enough. I stopped enjoying myself at that 1 beer. That next piece is the abuse. And I kind of went on that the last time. When I've gone over and I've still experienced those same consequences, but I do it again and I do it again. That's the abuse part. This is when we are now rewiring our brain. We have now set up signals and neurons to talk to each other to go, oh, Lori's at that taqueria, I'm dancing, and I'm already starting to feel the effects and I haven't even drank. So I've rewired. I've built a nice little pod of receptors. Of course, that's not what it looks like. And that the information is going to them. And you know, the more I do this, the bigger that pot grows. So I have more receptors. So now it takes me more and more to get to that initial feeling. That very first night when I thought, oh, this is the best thing ever. It's not happening anymore. And the more I try, the harder I have to work, which means the more I have. And maybe now I'm not even drinking beer. Maybe I'm drinking a margarita, I'm drinking this and this and that, but it's taking me more and more to get to that spot. And I'm having more and more consequences along the way. Well, let's say if I started that at 28 or 30, now I'm in my, you know, early 30s or maybe late 30s. And oh, by the way, I have a predisposition because my dad was an alcoholic. And now I'm starting to see, if I don't drink, I feel really bad. You know, I'm sweating at night. You know, there's that time I just don't remember too. And I'm still having that irritability. Dog's not happy with me. Now I have moved into physical dependence, from that shakes to the sweats to my body saying, feed me in the morning at 8 o'clock. And now when we've got to that physical dependence, we are in that addiction. And up along the way, we might have been able to stop before that physicality. We might have been able to stop. But now in the physical part, we are in danger if we do stop by ourselves, because if I stop suddenly, I could die. One of the things around alcohol and benzodiazepines, is the two drugs that can kill you when you suddenly stop, is that our body says, oh, no, 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 no. Or our brain says, no, 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 you must feed me. And if you don't feed me, I'm gonna make you very sick. In fact, I may give you a seizure. And this is how often people die. So that is that progression. And it depends upon your predisposition. If you've had a parent or a grandparent or somebody back there having an ism, and I'm gonna say ism because it could be other types of drug, alcohol, we are more predisposed. So part of that time from where I was abusing to the actual physicality of the addiction can come at a different time. It just depends upon where you're at. It can come faster too when we have these other pieces of trauma that have not been dealt with. So for instance, if you are coming from, you know, a home that had this addictions, or I'm sorry, that had this traumatic experience, and let me just kind of say something really quickly. If we have had parents that have not been available, that can be deemed as abuse. Now that may seem pretty harsh, but when we are children, we need things like care, nurture, protection, boundaries, being able to be kids. And if parents aren't there for that, we often can feel abandoned. And so, and that's traumatic, by the way. And so in that piece, then we carry this into our next relationship. And when those feelings then come up, we try to bury them in the substance or compulsive behavior. And let me make it clear, it doesn't have to be a substance. It can be another compulsive behavior like spending, sex addiction, gambling, you name it, we see it. I'm going to stop for a second again and see if there is any questions or thoughts or brave people wanting just to talk. And I'm going to take a drink. Okay. Nothing coming. Okay. I'm sure just everyone's stunned by all this information. So, or overwhelmed. I hope I haven't traumatized you. This is a lot. And I'm not trying to be flippant by that. It is a lot of information. It is big stuff. So often when we think about, when we see clients, often when we're beginning to do their treatment plan and figure out how to help them, this is the place where we have to go to. We have to see where they got stuck. We have to unpack that trauma. And basically, we also have to educate them what this trauma is, and then help them see where they need coping skills, where they might need help to process the next step. So oftentimes we're looking at giving our clients a life story to help understand where they came from, so we can also see the patterns of what's happened in their life, where they come from. Oftentimes when we think about addiction, we see patterns of trauma through their history. And when those patterns do come up, then we can help them begin to recognize their triggers. So let me stop there for a sec. When I think about triggers, that's not only in substance, but it's also in trauma. So for instance, I was speaking about those that may have been abandoned. We may then feel triggered when we presume someone else is abandoning us and go to that same spot of when we were 16 or whenever that happened. And that can be as real today as if it was happening from them. So we help them learn to have coping skills with addressing that trauma. I think there's a question.
It's along the same line, similar lines. Someone's asking if trauma is avoidable or combatable in instances like hurricanes and pandemics.
Oh, I so love that question, because I think that, you know, before Harvey, I might have said, yeah, as a therapist, because I'm thinking, you know, I have all these tools. I'm pretty cool in that department. I know myself. I'm self-aware. You know, I have all these therapist friends until Harvey. And then Harvey put me on my butt. All of a sudden, I was having panic attacks. All of a sudden, I was having symptoms of irritability, not being able to sleep, sadness, yes, and those outbursts in the car. So I think that this, again, when we think about that trauma, when it overwhelms a system, and it doesn't matter who you are, and it doesn't matter what you have, if it's overwhelming, it's overwhelming. So I don't think it is. I think that it happens. I think we can absolutely find ways of self-care. Like, okay, for me, I know a hurricane's coming down the pike. I do self-care so I'm not in the middle of it, or I'm ensuring for my safety so I don't re-traumatize myself. I'm hoping that makes sense. I think that we can be aware of our things that we need to work on so that we aren't re-traumatized. Yeah. Kamari, did that answer that question? Because I don't know if I lost it. Okay. So I think that's that piece, is that I think even with a lot of knowledge, with a lot of self-insight, we can have that awareness, but our body acts as our body acts. And I really want to make the point that it's in our perception as well. What I may perceive as traumatic, you may not. It's about our own bodies. And on that, I would be remiss if I didn't say this. When we don't deal with our trauma, our body holds the score. So this is a piece, and this is why we're triggered later in life. So let's just go back to that story of abandonment. If I haven't dealt with that piece, then I am going to be re-stimulated each time that happens, or we perceive that it happens. I mean, somebody can tell me I'm, you know, maybe they call off a date and I may feel abandoned just because of my own stuff if I haven't dealt with it. I mean, we can perceive abandonment in many ways. It's probably most likely not real because it's our stuff that's up front. So it is about perception. So there's a lot of people that were in Harvey that weren't impacted in that way. But I guarantee you that there were a lot of people that were also harmed. Kamari, did you have one more? Oh, okay. So when I think about trauma and how it reigns on addiction, it's not just addiction, you know, but this is the underbelly of addiction. Trauma can, if untreated, can give us depression. Trauma can turn into PTSD, which is something that is serious. Depression is serious as well. Anxiety disorder comes from trauma. So it's important to take care of. It's important to find ways of handling what's underneath. And I will say that most of the world, you know, when we think about our world, that's not what we are really focusing on, is what's underneath. We're really looking at what's on top, what's our next piece. So if you find yourself having struggles and having ruminating thoughts, are sensitive to the different parts of your world that you might see other people not, it's time to get help, and it's okay to get help. That's, I think, the difference today than maybe in my parents' time. You know, back in the my parents' time, it was just pull your boots up and get on with it. Just say no, stop it. But today we have a different view that this is not about things that we can really help. But when we do get help, we can really heal. Oh, that's beautiful. So that's why we're here today, is not only, you know, the council is here, I am here, we've got a plethora of therapists that are willing to help, and the council is just a great place to start. Even if we can't help you with your problems today, we will make sure that we have a referral source that can assist you. So I'm going to pause for one more moment and see if there's any other questions or concerns.
Mm-hmm. There's a request for you to talk a little bit about the ways, self-care, some ways of self-care. So the question says, what are ways of self-care with other behaviors that don't involve substances, like sleep disturbances or anxiety? So I think they're wanting suggestions for self-care if other behaviors are coming up, like self-care or like sleep disturbances or anxiety.
Well, believe it or not, the breath is our first line of action. You know, when we have anxiety or we have other things going on, depression, you name it, oftentimes we're holding our breath. We aren't breathing, we're not breathing well. We might take those, often people would hear me go, well, that was because I was holding my breath for the last 10 minutes. And it's really not holding my breath, I'm just shallow breathing. But finding a way, and I love this question because this really also gives me an opportunity to talk about another part of our brain. When we take a breath, so for instance, I know this is silly, but I'm just gonna take a breath. Right then and there, I don't know if you could see my shoulders, they went down. I am allowing my parasympathetic nervous system to come on board. So when we are in that fight, flight, freeze moment, which is our limbic part of our brain, oldest part of our brain back here, that's what helps us survive through all this. This is what helps us become from a caveman fighting dinosaurs to the human beings that we are today. But we need that prefrontal cortex to breathe and to understand. So that's why we breathe. So we can allow that breath to get back to that thinking to where we can then make the decisions. So in calming down just then, which allowed me to remember the limbic system, so thank you, we then can go to those other things that can assist us in self-help. So breath, so we stop and we breathe. We're then able to make a better decision there as opposed to a reaction. So for instance, when Hurricane Harvey was good and gone, even though it rained, I'd get activated because my sympathetic nervous system would come on board, and that's the gas. So I learned to breathe. I also learned what we call resourcing. And resourcing is to get to that place of finding that, and we call it a happy place. You probably have heard that before. Somebody says, oh, go to your happy place. Well, that's the truth. Go to that place where it is nothing but happy. Maybe it's the mountains, maybe it's the beach, maybe it's the ocean, maybe it's your puppy. And you picture that, and you get there with your felt sense, all the senses you possibly can do. So I'm gonna go with my puppy right this moment, because she's in the room. So I can visualize her, and I can feel what her little fur feels like, and I can hear her in my mind's eye barking to go outside, and I can see her running with her little hip hop skip. And all of a sudden, the brake of that parasympathetic goes on, and I'm back there again. And now I've modulated. I've kind of come down from that activated state to this yin kind of state where I can again think and take care. So those are two really important self-care pieces. I will say for anxiety and depression is always get out and exercise. Get outside, move your body. We see that walking can be as effective as an antidepressant. It's important to move our body. That helps the chemistry move around. And when we've had these things, I'm going to say again, it's just really important to talk to somebody who can hear you. If it's not a therapist, it's a friend that is there for you, that's not judgmental, that you can say what you need to say and be okay with. I think those are the couple things I can offer you.
That breath helped me just now.
Good, good, good.
I have a question, actually. I'm thinking for folks who are, and the response in the chat, it was thank you for that. So I think it helped all of us. I'm wondering for folks who are, because like you mentioned, we're all experiencing some type of trauma in this moment with everything that's happening in our world right now. And so I'm wondering, and we know that we're all, some of us are coping really well. Most of us are in some way eating too much or drinking too much or too muching of something. I feel like is not an uncommon thread for folks. But I wonder if people would love to hear you just talk again about how to know when it's too much and you really need to, and your self-care might not be enough, so that they'll know when it's time to pick up the phone and make the call to us or to someone else.
Well, I think that when we start to have the consequence of that too much is when we have to pull back and go, what's going on? You know, I've been hearing, well, alcohol sales are out of the roof. Mm-hmm. We see that report. I think that when we start to have some questions of our own, I mean, we usually know ourselves about that. Oh man, that wasn't good. And I think when we can hear that enough, that's when we go, uh-oh, I'm eating too much. And I think that's a really, what I've seen the memes of before and after the COVID, we're all thin, and then when COVID's here, we've kind of blossomed a little. I think that when we start to have those feeling bad, I feel shame, I feel sad for myself that I've eaten too much or I'm drinking too much. I think those are the times that we have to go, uh-oh, what's happening? And it doesn't mean that we need formal therapy or anything like that, but we might need to talk. We might need to have a friend and get that connection. And this is also the time when we're not connecting, because I mean, we may connect here, but this is not a real connection. You know, I'm happy to see people, but it's not that same. It's not the same of being right next to them and feeling that warmth or having that hug or that love, right? And so we really are, this is a really hard time. So we have to find our ways. You know, I get it through my animals. You know, I don't know what I would do if I didn't have them. We got to find a way. If it's not that, if it's a good friend that we can be safe with, if it's our parents, if it's our family, we got to have that connection. So I would seek that connection as well, safely, because we're not out of the woods. So yeah, did that answer that? Okay. Whew-wee. I think I'm about out of juice. So if there's any questions or other thoughts.
I don't think so.
Okay. Well, I just want to thank Kamari, you and Nikolai for helping me get on, and all those folks that have asked questions and have tuned in. And for those future tuner-inners, thank you. We here at the council really are wanting to help and get the word out about trauma, addiction, and whatever else you may be struggling with. We are here.
Thank you everyone for your participation or listening ear for the Council on Recovery's conversations on addiction, recovery, and family, from our living room to yours. The Council on Recovery continues to provide treatment services via telehealth, including assessments, individual, group, and family therapy, as well as intensive outpatient treatment. In the course of this conversation, you may have recognized that you or someone you know needs help. Start here at the Council by calling 713-914-0556. If you enjoyed today's conversation, please consider making a donation to the Council on Recovery. Your support helps us continue our service to the community during this season in the form of CEU events, remote clinical services, remote community education, and more. Thank you all so much.